Welcome into this sacred space of three spiritual besties. Grab a seat and join us for raw and unfiltered conscious conversations. Welcome into today's Conscious Conversations. Today, you'll be with your hosts, Ashley, Nicole, and Brittany. And today we are going to talk about action and alignment. Who wants to start?
Me, Ashley. So this topic came up in a candid conversation off mic. Now we're bringing it to mic to really talk about how if you are in a place that feels out of balance or out of alignment and you're trying to take action towards something, that can be something you're creating, just your day-to-day life, and you're feeling like you're running in molasses, you're having some stagnancy energy coming through, and you're wondering why that's occurring. It is so difficult to take action when you are out of alignment. So that brings us into kind of like, what is alignment? Alignment can go into your timelines, your energy centers, your conscious perspective, your day-to-day reality. Essentially, if something feels inauthentic in your reality, if something's not resonating with you anymore, but it's still there and you're just faking it till you make it, putting on a brave face, that forces you to be out of alignment.
For me, I think it's very interesting to talk about alignment because the way that my energy works is I'm typically in alignment with multiple timelines at the same time. So I am always bouncing around, which makes me feel very out of alignment and unable to move forward with certain things and certain aspects. But I can also then perceive possible outcomes for multiple things at the same time to get more into alignment. Like, okay, if I want to create today, but I'm feeling very stuck, what's one of my options that would move me more towards creation in that sense? I'm not stuck.
For me, when I'm out of alignment, I'm typically I notice that it manifests for me in the way of like negative self-talk. So that's like my first kind of indicator that something's going wrong when I'm being a little bit too harsh on myself within my own thoughts and head and feelings. And so the way that I typically align with my perfectly balanced self, if that's my thing, or if that's even a thing, is I live on the West Coast, so I live right next to the ocean. So getting myself into the ocean and kind of doing like a cleanse really helps me to fall back into alignment. Also, I will say that because of the way that my abilities work, I typically take on others' thoughts and feelings about themselves, and I kind of make that my own truth. And so when I'm starting to see that I'm thinking of myself in a way that I don't necessarily I wouldn't do it on a regular day, or in my everyday, that's also an indicator of me being out of alignment. And so I need to remember to put up my protections so that I do stay aligned within myself.
That's a really good point that you bring up, is that sometimes your disalignment or your lack of alignment is due to lack of boundaries or a potential lack of protections. Whether that is, I always speak highly of this if people are nurses and work in hospitals, or if you work in kind of like high spirit locations, like that would be a nursing home, a hospital, a graveyard. You might work there. That's super cool if you do, by the way. Let us know. That'd be a cool guest on the podcast. But the energy of those spaces is so high spirit traffic that it's so much energy around you at all times that it's like a hot spot. I essentially call it that energy constantly within your frequency can cause your energy to get out of alignment because you are, if there's lack of sovereignty, being influenced by these spirits that are around you. So that's why protections and boundaries can be so important. And we are going to do an episode about that later on at some point in more depth. But essentially, coming into a space of you have veils and boundaries, so these energies cannot affect you. So then, if there's lack of alignment still within there, within your energy, and you're feeling like, okay, my energy is having a hard time taking action, what shadow work's needed? what energy is keeping you within these certain spaces, what energy needs to be released, what needs to be kind of paid attention to.
Do either of you have an instance of recent that you have actually gone through this, like where you're out of alignment and you recognized it, and what did you do to kind of move through it?
I guess I have a couple examples, but one of them being is when, and this is something I've learned actually from Ash, is calibrating. So sometimes when there's something energetically going on, especially for me with the sun, like we just had a solar flare, I become very affected by solar flares. I feel it in my head. I feel it just like very dizzying, very draining, and I will ask for my energy to be recalibrated into its best working frequency for the now moment. And that helps me bring myself more into alignment so my head isn't so fuzzy and it's a lot more clear as to which way I need to be going and what is actually my energy versus what is somebody else's energy. That's something that I find extremely helpful.
One major thing for me that I've worked on for years, which you actually made me think of, Nicole, with what you were just talking about, is when my head feels fuzzy and I'm out of alignment, usually I'm angry. And I've tried real hard to have intentional anger and use it for good and use it for sacredness and not for outbursts and just bulldozing through that emotion and really sitting with it, making space for it. That's taken me years to work through. I'm actually in therapy still working on it right now, so I'm not perfect at it. But it's really, for me, it's day to day, just like I'll just get a burst of anger and then I'll feel me instantly oop off out of alignment because I just feel it coming in and shaking myself up. So that's when I'm like, okay, this is a purposeful disalignment for me because something's coming up. Something's coming up that I need to work on. So I know, yes, I can calibrate back into that alignment, but this out of alignment needs a second. So I'm not going to stay in this for too long. I'm going to take account for it. I'm going to nurture it, heal it, do what I got to do energetically, but then calibrate back into alignment with this new energy because the calibrating takes your baseline and it goes to the new baseline if you've healed or released something. But anger is something that takes me out of alignment so fast more than anything else. It's like a volcano just comes through and I get knocked off kilter. And then I have to try real hard to get back into alignment from those spaces.
I think that anger too is kind of like it has like such a spiraling effect where it's like all it takes is that one emotion or that one emotional outburst. And then it's like, gosh, it could turn into everything else. So it's really important that you recognize those things and then to take recognition of them and then stop yourself and then give yourself credit for, yeah, okay, you had the emotional outburst. We're human, we're going to. But recognizing and appreciating the fact that you could stop it a little bit sooner this time. And it's just with the practice of keep of doing that is how you get better at that. That's something that I have also worked on a lot. Anger was like my number one emotion for a long, long, long time, and then anger turned into sadness. So like umbrella, it's an umbrella emotion. But of recent for myself, the thing that I have learned that really knocks me off kilter is when my energy is in like too many different areas. So if I invest too much emotionally into people, I was recently a part of a community and I had my, foot in every door to be quite honest. And that's the way that I show that I love and I care about people is that I do take recognition of their emotions and I do try to offer the help or, even sometimes the unsolicited advice. But I really took recognition and understanding that if I'm connected to too many people, it drains me. And it not only am I experiencing the emotions of myself, I'm experiencing everything that they're going through. And it's so, so much. So I had to remove myself from those groups. And it was really unfortunate. And I think some people did take it a little bit personal. And that's okay too. But for me and myself, in order to move on and kind of a better way and really put up my boundaries and accept that okay, I can't do those kinds of things anymore, unfortunately. um I think it's important to be able to, no matter what it takes for you to kind of get back to self, you have to do those things even if it's at the cost of maybe a friendship or a relationship or whatever that may be, because at the end of the day, when you sit down, you have to be able to be happy with yourself and your choices.
One of the things that really was coming up strong for me, just hearing what you guys were saying as well, is I would like to remind our listeners that this is not an over the night thing that we've learned. We've been practicing and becoming more aware for years. It's not like, oh yeah, last week we just had no idea. And then this week all of a sudden we're like putting up boundaries and protections and pushing people away or pulling our energy back or talking about timelines. This is definitely something that has evolved over time. And if you're new and you're listening and you want to put in the work and put in the practice, you will also evolve over time. And one of the things that really helped me in the beginning of my journey was a book. It's called The Power of Now. I have tried many times to read this book. I have started it, I have never finished it, and I've started it multiple times throughout my journey. Every time I read it, I understand it a little bit more. And with that, it's always talking about being present and being now. And at first, I was like, I don't understand what any of that means. No idea. But now I'm at a point where I understand, like, if my son is having an emotional outburst because he's upset about something, being present there with him, but not taking on what he's experiencing. So, learning how to be there and be present, but not feeling like you need to hold the weight of everybody else's stuff.
I think what comes up for me when you say that is like, I'm like, oh, how do you do that? Right? Because that is something, if you can say like, oh, just don't take on other people's emotions. Okay, how do you not do that? Especially when you're somebody who is an empath, right? So what I've found that really works for myself is there's this saying that I've really come into lately, and it's, those the saying like walk a mile in my shoes, right? Well, those are your shoes and these are my shoes. So you walk in your shoes and I walk in my shoes. So at the end of the day, I can just understand like that's not my stuff. I love you, I support you, I'm here for you, I'm here to listen, but at the end of the day that's all you. Like, and I have my way I'm gonna go with this. So I've found that saying something like that in my head, like those are your shoes, these are my shoes. That really helps to remind me, oh yeah, okay, bring it back to self. Those are not your issues. Let's keep it moving. Do you guys have anything that you do that kind of helps you to disconnect from those types of things?
I think for me, one of the biggest things is my clairsentient ability and how my body feels around certain people or places. If I'm not excited or anxious, which I identify in a certain way in my body, and I'm going to your house or I'm going to interact with you or I'm going to a certain place and I start feeling absolutely sick, that's out of alignment. Or there's something negative there and I don't want to deal with that either way. Either way. So I think for me, my clairsentient ability really assists me with alignment because I can really feel when I'm out of balance and alignment too. Like it doesn't feel good. It feels a little like sickness to me, more in my like solar plexus and heart area. They just feel not on the same page and like they're not flowing well, and I'm really in tune with my light body, and if it's not flowing well, it's kind of like distracting for me throughout my day, to be quite honest with you. So if I identify something that's like hindering my flow and it's not purposeful for me personally in my journey to look at, or if it's not a moment where I'm able to potentially assist that person through something, I energetically disconnect and like physically even remove myself sometimes, because if I'm in those spaces for too long, my energy due to my gifts will start shifting them into alignment, and that might not be in the highest good for whoever else is there. So I have to just like pop myself out and be like, this is a space that I'm not meant to be in right now. So that takes a lot of courage, a lot of authority, and sometimes some difficult conversations.
I check out. I do. I check out a bit. And it's because I then get so much into my own head. I can tell then if I'm like getting lost in my thoughts. And that can be something that shows me that I'm out of alignment because I start like spiraling. And it's not so much like overthinking something I said, it's just trying to decipher something. Like, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? What is this? And like I try to like nitpick every little thing that's probably not even really existing, but then I'm creating it to exist. But that's one of the things that helps me realize if I'm out of alignment and then getting back into alignment is really the perspective shift of, wait, am I thinking this? Is this really happening? Or am I just perceiving it in a way that isn't really happening? Or am I assuming, right? Am I assuming that this person's thinking this thing or experiencing this thing, and it's really not that way? It's just me thinking that.
I do that all the time. I do that all the time where I assume like I'm perceived a certain way. And then I'm like, oh, this is what this person is probably thinking. And like it's so maddening because unless that's the truth, unless they've said those words or have acted upon something like that, it actually does not exist, right? So it's so hard to remember, like, don't let your head do too much. Shut it down. You gotta just sometimes when you're spiraling like that and you're trying to get back into alignment, you really just have to sometimes tell your brain to shut the fuck up and be done with it and walk away from it?
My guides have this funny saying with me. They're like, stop trying to stretch the shoe. Because that saying of like, if the shoe fits, wear it. And they're like, stop trying to stretch the shoe. It doesn't fit. Leave it at that, because then that's me trying to like align in other people's perceptions of me, and that causes a cycle of inauthentic energy, align out of alignment energy too. So I'm like, just is like this spiral. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. I do kind of want to ask you guys too, like if you've identified something that's out of alignment in your reality, how do you get rid of it, or how do you shift its frequency so that it aligns with you more?
Literally tell it to fuck off. I'm not even kidding you. I'm so blunt with that kind of shit. Excuse my language. Excuse me. If something is in my face and I do not like it, I do not want it, and it doesn't happen often. So when it happens, I jump right on it, and I am all the things you don't want to experience. You know what I mean? And so that it's speaking my truth. That's the thing, is that like I'm not going to allow anything that doesn't align with myself. I'm not going to allow anything to take energy from me that I don't want to. So, and you know who's going to advocate for me? Me. Nobody else. Me. So I am the first to just like be do and say and act in whatever way to remove myself from that situation or move past that situation. And typically what I find is, let's say it's a person or a situation, it's typically not a repeated occurrence for myself, and that may not align with other people, because I understand that people don't necessarily have that type of personality, right? Where they can advocate for themselves when it's necessary to. So if that is the type of thing that it doesn't work for you, I think just remembering in moments of vulnerability that you do have to keep yourself safe. You do have to keep yourself from allowing others to, maybe, I don't know, allowing others to inflict anything that is not of your will upon you. And so what does that look like for those who don't have such a strong personality like that? I'm not sure. I couldn't really offer any advice there, but if you could take a piece of advice from me, it is, you're a lot stronger than you think that you are. You truly are. And when people get called out, they don't like it. And so typically they'll back away from you, and you can remove yourself from those situations.
For me, I feel like same thing like Brittany said, like when it comes to energetic beings, if I do not want you around, I say it plainly. I say it bluntly, and it is what it is. If I'm not comfortable with it, then you don't have permission to be here at all. As far as like the human side and in like interactions with people and situations, it's something that I'm learning very much of, like, what am I willing to give? Am I willing to go and do the thing I don't want to do? And learning like actually like who I am and the how other people may perceive certain things, and speaking up for that a little bit more than I used to.
I love that you mentioned, how much are you willing to give to this energy, this person? Because a lot of the times in my sessions, I'll see energies that are out of alignment with, say, their mother or sometimes it's even their children. And that's not something, especially the children, that's not something you can just get rid of. That's not something, if you're out of alignment with those energies, you can do anything physically truly about. Well, my brain just totally went to like an avenue of like where it could be possible. We're not going down that route here. We're staying in like the noble high path here with that one. But if you're in an area of alignment and you feel like you're giving and giving to an out of alignment energy, or an energy that's energy sucking from you, or it's not an equal energy exchange, but they're your mom or your child and you want that energy in your life and you're not willing to get rid of it, I always give suggestions of putting different energetic barriers around your corded connection with them. So the way that that can be done for many of you is just intentionally or energetically indicating that you're okay with this energy being in your life, and physically you're gonna deal with them and their energy how you need to, but energetically speaking, corded connection speaking, they're not able to siphon your energy. And that can make physical out of alignment interactions a lot easier, just because if, say you have a mom who's very like narcissistic and triggering, but it's your mom and you still want them in your life, if you don't have that corded connection, those instances can become way less triggering, and they're not going to make you out of alignment because they're happening physically or within their energy, because you have that buffer.
It is interesting to think sometimes like how we can become out of alignment because of the people around us. And there's not always something we can do about the people around us. But then it also comes into, what is it? You can't control someone else's actions. But you can control your reaction. Being mindful of that and sitting with that and being like, oh, well, how did I handle this before? Because I know this isn't the first time it's happened. So what can I do differently? We can't always change the people around us in who they are and how they perceive things. What's in our control and what's out of our control is also something like to think about with alignment.
I think too, for people who aren't quite sure how to deal with these situations off the top of their head, another important thing that we forget about is that we do have guides, right? They're part of our spiritual teams for a reason. And so turning to them and asking, like if you can't find the answers for yourself and you've exhausted every option, you can always turn to your guides and say, okay, what should I do in order to make this more aligned with myself? How can I make this work for myself? You can do that with your guides. Your ancestors are really good, especially when it comes to those human connections that we have and what's best serving for, your future and your children's future and anything beyond that, is to really understand and kind of ask and sit with those energies and be like, what would work best? What is going to work best for myself now and my future self? And not to forget that you do have help outside of your day-to-day interactions between people, or even a therapist, or, you can really turn inward and ask your guides for that help. And you can also just kind of sit in a future timeline for yourself and what you want that to look like for you. What does that alignment look like for you? And then just do the necessary things to get there. Call it to you if you have to.
And that brings us kind of back to the beginning of the episode, where when is action coming in and then when is alignment coming in, and how they coincide. So that brings us to our affirmation for today, which is action comes with alignment. So it feels easier to flow into action when you are feeling aligned. So if you feel like you're hitting roadblock after roadblock, what is not aligned in your reality? And as Brittany mentioned, your guides are masters at identifying that. With your consent and permission, give them a little phone call and ask them, hey guides, highlight something to me in my reality that's out of my alignment. And if you're new to talking with your guides, ask them to show you it in a very specific way, and they will deliver. So again, that affirmation is action comes with alignment, and within that space of self, that's also empowering and authoritative, because you know that your actions based in alignment and your alignments based in action, and then that brings in balance. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode and expanding within conscious conversations. We now close this sacred space with love and gratitude. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected.